Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to week 6 of Art Appreciation. For our topic this week is art and community. And I'm really happy to welcome Brian J. Evans to our class. Brian and I met at University of Washington when Brian was studying dance, and we were both there during COVID, and I think we've only met in person one time, maybe twice. I once or
I
twice.
think just the once. Yeah, more. No, t twice.
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 Twice. We've met in person twice, but we keep up our friendship and conversations through Zoom meetings pretty regularly. So, Brian, would you like to introduce yourself and your creative practice to the students?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Brian J. Evans. My pronouns are he, him, his. And I am in the realm of what I have come to know as citizen artistry. And my main medium is the embodied arts. And citizen artistry is essentially trying to take whatever modality that you're working with and figure out a way in which to move that energy into education, healthcare, community outreach, and engagement. And now, of course, with everything that's going on, even the word citizen feels very potent and charged because the idea of citizen in the sense of belonging and what does it mean to belong to any group and who gets to determine what internal or external factors are involved in like having someone be a part of or be included, or is it something that we uh, discover for ourselves or things that are placed upon us. And a lot of my artistry is about trying to uncover that, both for myself and my and the communities that either again have invited me in or that I just find myself in by either proximity or the societal stories that are placed upon me. I'm a mixed race human. I'm cisgender. I came from a very conservative small town in southern Minnesota and have since come into contact with so many different perspectives and having the and embodied arts in sort of the large umbrella of like anything that is artistically aesthetic in terms of like using the body. So whether it is visual art or dance, theater, and my way of thinking is that it's expanded as to the nth degree. Like everybody has a skill set, everybody's using their body in some capacity, and so you could very well make the argument, and I do often, that we're all engaged in some sort of artistic expression, though very often we are not led to believe that what we do is artistic. And that's where I come in as both a professor and an artist myself, is I try to use every modality that I use to convince folks or help them rediscover within themselves that if you can, you know, draw something, you can paint something, or if you're in a studio and you kick your leg or create worlds, if you can do that on a page or in a studio, you can do that everywhere. Because the same cognitive structures that allow you to have an idea, think it's worthy enough to pursue, and then actually do it. It's the same infrastructure across the board. So um, that's a lot of what my work is involved in, helping folks process all the really difficult paradoxes, conundrums that we encounter with a society that both tells us that we must be individuals, and yet there are uh, so many ways, indirectly and directly, that our society shapes who we are, dare I say, controls or influences who we can be, and a whole lot that says that we we shouldn't be certain things or can't be or they don't exist. And so how do you do that? For me, the best way is using the embodied arts to help figure that out and then to invite people into that process, um, either at the beginning, during, or after to help us belong to each other.
Oh, thank you, Brian. Um, I'm wondering if you could follow that up by just maybe just even just continuing to talk about specifically the ways you engage with your creative community.
Yeah. I'm a teacher, I think first and foremost. So I'm a visiting assistant professor right now at St. Olaf College in Northfield, Minnesota. And I'm in the dance department and I teach things like modern dance, dance history, and a course that I made in grad school called Embodying Activism, which takes a look at the living definition that you might have of that phrase embodying activism, and then how do you do that? How do you determine that? And then as we look through different lenses of social justice, whether it be sexuality, politics, climate, and ethics, do you see your activism showing up in those spaces? And so again, as an educator, specifically an arts educator, I think a lot of my work is about engaging with folks both at a post-secondary level, but I also teach at Young Dance, which is one of the longer running youth dance companies and schools in the nation. And they have programming from two to adults. And we do a lot of mixed ability access work as well. And then we have a company that I co-direct. And we make work and present it to the world. Uh, so that's one aspect. The stuff I'm working on, both research and my artistic endeavors, are this framework called Busking for Reparations, where a colleague and I, one of two colleagues of color in the department that I was in a former school I was at, talking about like what would happen if two black people posted outside of Commons and started busking with a sign for reparations. What would that do? What conversation? And it was centered on descendants of the enslaved, but has since expanded into this idea of like what does repair look like? What does it feel like? Is it tied to a financial outcome? Is it separated from that? And how does repair show up um, in the interdisciplinary or intersectional aspects of both the work but also the communities? And if I ask you, what home feels like, do we have a similar sense of that, or are we not ever able to go home, especially when we can't find home within our body? There's also another process called do process, do spelled D-O, as a call to action. And that has a lot to do, again, top of mind when the first point of contact with the criminal justice system can result in death. When in the state of Minnesota, which is where I'm at right now, we don't have the death penalty. So, presumably, you get arrested, commit mass murder. But as long as you make it to the end of the criminal justice system, in no way would you be put to death. And yet, a traffic stop, a protest, um, somebody looking at you wrong, apparently, can get you killed by the state. And so, how do we who are left process through that? Um, and then I'm a singer-songwriter. I write a lot of poetry as well, and I'm a big wordsmith guy. And what I discovered in grad school is that the English language is at times a very poor container for all the things that I want to talk about. I'm also a verbal processor, so you'll notice that I'll just sort of like meander and hopefully make some points worthwhile. But I think uh, that sort of fundamental understanding of like words. And this is a quote from John Dewey, words are placeholders for steps and actions. And so, if that's the case, and we imbue the meaning into words, similarly into our actions, it's about then how can you use those words to um, redefine both their meaning, but collectively putting them together in orders that would suggest different outcomes, you know. So I love like juxtaposing words like courageous vulnerability, audacious hope, right? It's those kinds of um, seemingly at odds definitions that I think have a lot of richness. And so trying to, again, display for folks uh, many, many possibilities. And I think the art that I make, my hope and goal is that, you know, 20, 30 years from now, it would be obsolete and not needed.
Mm.
Um, in my most cynical moments, that's probably not going to happen. But I would hope, you know, that I look back at the work that I made around this time and that it would be like, oh, that's cute. Hmm.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, I feel that. Wow. Um, Thanks for sharing all that, Brian. I know you have a couple of projects you're working on right now, or I think you said throughout the month of February, there's a couple groups you're engaged with and actively working with. Would you be able to share those specific projects that you're working on right now?
Yeah. I'm making a couple works at the college, making a couple works for Young Dance. And essentially like the dance works that I make are about the same thing. It's this tension between society and the individual and sort of capturing what that looks like with moving bodies. Um, the The project right now that has the most excitement for me is this project called Dreamstorming Access. And there are five of us collaborators, two that are out of state in terms of Minnesota, one's in Maine, one's in Wisconsin. And we're really trying to center the idea of access from the beginning of a creation process. Two of the artists are wheelchair users. Um, and all of us have uh, teaching experience in trying to figure out how to craft spaces that are um, equitable, but equitable in a way that is wrestling with the tension of that conflation of equity and equality, right? Where it's like we're wrestling with this idea of like we don't go unless everyone can go, and yet we know that everyone can't go everywhere, right? And so uh, it's contending with that tension of what does equity look like? And in my estimation, it's an aspiration. It's something that it can very well be achieved, but it's like fleeting, right? It's like ah, and then it's gone, right? And it's it's something that you have to work towards, and it's momentary and it's always moving. And it's sort of the idea of like finding balance, but balance that's not static, balance that's moving, right? Like all of us are balanced right now, but we're always shifting and moving and finding the equilibrium between us and the earth. And so how do you do that with five people, right? With vastly different experiences and different ages, and different ways of being and different limitations and different abilities. And so trying to figure out within the limitation how to be expansive, right? It's another juxtaposition, right? Expanded limitation or limited expansion, right? Well, like, what does that even mean? What does that look like? And we're having to come up with new words. One of my colleagues, his name's Gabriel Roderick. and he goes by the alias of Freak, Frequae. Um, that's not how you spell it, but he's a great artist. You can check him out on online. And he does a lot of music and talks about these ideas of being in a body that can't do the things that it used to. And similar, we have a kinship of like me being in this perceived black body and I can't be seen any other way. What does that mean? Similar to being a woman, similar to being, in the intersection of what what society places on us, and then how can you find expansiveness in that? And so we're making stuff. We're making some cool shit. That's sort of like our goal and mantra is like to dream up stuff and then actually make it. Got a couple gigs in August, and we're sort of meeting throughout the year. Um, and yeah, trying to not let the limitations both within who makes up the group, but also the financial structures, right? Like I think artists do a really good job of like limiting themselves because they know what venue they're going to be presented at. They know what materials they may or may not be able to buy, right? And so you already factor that in, right? I can only do this, this, and this. Okay, so I'm going to make this. And so how can you make something that is outside that framework and expect and present to venues and producers and funders and educate them along the way of like, how could this look? How could we future a different future, right? Uh, how can we tap into the wisdom of 40 years from now, knowing that our goals are to be well represented artists and humans in society, right? Can we do that? And I think artists do that all the time, except that it's like within the frame of whatever we're working with. And so how can we sort of make that a pedagogy in and of itself, and again take it outside the studio? Um, and so those all sort of feel like they're in the same conversation, whether I'm making on post-secondary folks or making stuff on youth or making folks within this collaboration. There's also a contact improv group, and we're calling ourselves Perpetual Endings. And same idea of like when you are improvising, you don't limit yourself of what it's supposed to be because you are in the process of constantly creating what it is. And that feels very dreamy to me. And in a time when there are just waves of atrocity flowing through the streets, both literally and figuratively. Uh, it becomes a necessary coping mechanism, I think, and I'll just speak for myself, to find ways in which to not escape the world, but to actively dream a different one and then embody it. Like it's all well and good to like, have a fantasy, but it's another thing to be active in the process with other people of like doing that. And so that feels very rich. And it's also this sort of like interstate connection, which feels very rock starish. I feel like, yeah, I know people across the world, similar to you, Quinn. It's just like, yeah. And, it's strange in that like I won't ever meet the people that are on the other side of this camera. I hope that I do, but if I don't, which is probable, just to let you know that like I love you very much. And the work that I do is the embodiment of that. And I don't say that in the sort of like I love you cliche, have a good life kind of way. It's like the future requires you to be in it. And I hope to be in the community that you find yourself, whether we meet each other or not, because there are so many people in this world that I will never meet, and yet I know that I love them and I need them, and and they must keep doing the work that they do because it's very important to how we future um, where we want to be, where we want to be, who we want to be, and the doing and the figuring out how to do that and scaling that up feels very important, especially in a society that would tell us to just shut up and sit down.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm appreciating um I'm appreciating so much of the dreaming for the future and thinking about the now and hoping for the future and the way that your work engages with the future. And I'm also appreciating the way you're putting two contradictory words together feels just makes me think of breathing, like two very different things. There's in and out, and it's like this like beautiful tension of like two things that don't make sense, but together there's like a vibrational it feels like there's a vibration and there's like life force
Hmm.
within that. So um ah yes. Well, I have one more question for you, and that is would you could you share with us if there's any artist or specific work of art that you've been interested in recently that you'd like to share with the class?
Uh, Interesting art. I mean, there's so much out there. I wish you all could come to Minneapolis and St. Paul and see the art that is just all over the place. Um, it's like, you know, tragically astounding. There's another juxtaposition. To see out of so much grief, um, the amount of artistic expression that just comes out of people. And whether that be, arts in a formal capacity of like putting pen to paper or, pigment to canvas, words to music, or even like they just turned the loon, which is the state bird, into like the Star Wars Rebel Alliance sign.
Uh,
Uh, and like that didn't come out of nowhere. Like that was a human who was like, I need to do something. Let me do this.
mhm.
And then again, doing it, having the idea, thinking it's worthy enough to do, and then doing it, and then seeing how other people get inspired to do the same. And there is this like reverence around, um, yeah, around that process of seeing others be inspired, and then you yourself hopefully are inspired. So I think the people I'll name drop again is Gabe's work, Freak. He's got a website. I can send Quinn, I can send you the links to that. Kelsey Peterson, who's also in our Dream Storming Axis group, has a documentary called Move Me, which is about how she is processing the decision as a wheelchair user to confront a new, different experimental therapy. And as a former dancer, and then Gabe and Kelsey made a piece that was all about sort of that experience and her first time being back on stage. Um, there's a Canadian artist named Shane Coizon who does spoken word poetry that I think is someone that I'm jiving with. Um, and then this South Korean band named Toe, which when you like discover an artist and it's in a time of both like euphoria but also trauma, and you're like, then you ascribe that artist to that time of your life. It's very
Mhm.
much happening
Mhm.
for me. Um, and again, without trying to sound too cliche about it, but the sort of name dropping of again the people on the other side of this video, like if I knew you, I'm sure I would drop your names in the chat as well, because um, yeah, any chance I get to just to tell you that what you're doing matters and all the ideas that you've sort of self-selected and said aren't good enough. The point, at least for me, is that you try them to see if you're right? Because you certainly are going to be right if you never do them. But I'd love for all of us to prove ourselves wrong when it comes to how small we are. Um, both as an individual, but that's the thing about collective action is that the more people who realize how big they can be, automatically make other people um, bring their being into existence. So, yeah, those are the folks off the top of my head that I've been jiving on and working with, and all of you. And now that you have my contact, or Quinn can give it to you, um, please, I'd love to see some of your art.
Ah, wow. Thank you, Brian. Um, yes, and there will be links below the video to a lot of the people you've mentioned, and of course, Brian's website and info. And thank you so much for joining us. It's really, I think the subject or this week's topic of art and community is so, of course, dear to me because this whole quarter I've only been interviewing people in my community, in my creative community, people I know and care about and actually like relate to and have a relationship with. And um yeah, we all gotta support and love and care for each other. And um yeah, I really appreciate you, Brian. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I appreciate all of you. I'll leave you with a quote that Gabe has, and I heard this quote the day that Renee Good was shot. Um, and the quote is very simple, but it's profound in its capacity. And it goes like this: carry the silence of those without a home. I think we all show up in the spaces that we do, and therefore, the people who could be there or should be there, um, who aren't for a variety of reasons, need us to carry them into those spaces. So carry the silence for those without a home. And yeah, love you very much.
Oh, love you too, Brian, and thank you. Thank you for sharing.